I was 40 years old when I finally discovered that I was an untouchable. The most shocking part, learning this truth was when Christ's love finally made perfect sense to me. In the next 12 minutes, I will show you how the 4 questions that the human soul fundamentally asks became my path to redemption and restoration. And why only one person in history has ever answered these questions in a way that completely satisfies the human soul. This is not just my testimony, but it's your path to light, to truth, to redeeming love. Because if Christ can transform an untouchable reject like me, he can transform you as well. So before we begin, with all the respect and love in my heart for my friends from other religions, especially Hinduism, because this is not about any religion being superior to the other religion. It's my story. It's my redemptive story. This is simply about sharing my journey into a deeper faith in Christ, a journey of confronting my own identity crisis, my own inner demons. I still kind of continue to fight many issues. I don't like my face. I don't like the color of my skin. I don't like standing in front of the camera. This is really awkward for me, and yet I'm called to do this, so I'm laying out my story before you. And one of the reasons that this channel went quiet for such a long time is because of my constant struggle with the imposter syndrome. My identity crisis was so severe that I broke many a heart with my own hands, and I destroyed many relationships. Godly women that God brought into my heart as I prayed fervently that I would find a partner for life to serve along with me. Deep inside, I had not recognized the deep healing that I needed. The consequences of these actions still bear upon me to this day. So whether you're questioning or searching or hurting or just simply curious, this story is for anyone who is simply on the search for something deeper in life. So comment searching if you're on the search for something deeper and something more precious and unshakable. But first, you need to understand the perfect storm that nearly destroyed me as a person. How does a 10-year-old kid who surrendered his life to Christ go on to becoming a suicidal musician, and how it took a mother's prayer for a full year of prayer for me to turn around to Jesus Christ all over again. Let me set the scene. I was born on 31st of August 1975. It was a rainy Sunday evening when I first took my breath. First grandchild on both the sides of my parenthood, and I literally grew up in the lap of luxury and love. If the meat that was served to me was not in a perfect cube, I wouldn't touch it. I was a very finicky and very picky eater, and the best parts of the meat that was cooked in the house was set apart for me. That's the kind of life I lived. I literally lived in a cocoon of love. But here's what made me different. I was born into a 4th generation Christian family, surrounded by pastors all around me. My mother's father was a pastor. His elder brother was also a pastor. My mother's youngest sister's husband was a pastor, and my father later on in his life, in his 40s, also became a pastor. While other Indian kids learned to watch Bollywood movies and enjoy Bollywood songs in Hindi and local languages, I was being introduced to Jim Reeves and Boney M, and my love for Western music started from there. While other Indian kids were busy watching Indian movies in the local languages, my father introduced me to Bond movies, and by the age of 14, I had literally watched all of Bond movies, and I was literally into Hollywood. And while other friends of mine were enjoying Indian music, I was busy listening to Debbie Gibson, Michael Jackson, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and all the hair bands of the 80s. I didn't just speak better English than all my peers and my friends, I actually thought in English. And I thought to speak in my mother tongue was an embarrassing thing. So I was born an IBCD, or an Indian born confused Desi, all right? Because I was a stranger among my own people. I had nothing in common with the common Indian. I was growing up in a different trajectory altogether, where I spoke in English, I behaved like I borrowed my culture from the friends of the family who were from the West, and I stuck out like a sore thumb among all my friends, and I became the butt of many jokes among my friends in the school. I was different straight out the gate. I had nothing in common with my friends. As I grew up, we would have to fill these forms in my school, or later on in other governmental agencies. And when the question of caste came, I would often just write the word human right there, and I didn't know what that meant. Of course, I had studied about the Varna system in the school, but I did not know the practical application of it and the reality of it in my society. So I grew up with this totally westernized mindset in my own land. My dad built a lakefront house, so I grew up climbing trees, swimming in the lakes, catching fresh fish, and it was a fairy tale. Childhood. At 10 years old, in 1985, I responded to the altar call given at the Vacation Bible School, and I became a Christian. I accepted Jesus as my personal Savior and Lord. But why would loving parents go to such lengths to protect me from what uncomfortable truth? You know, sometimes love looks like protection. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is to shield you from the world which would define you by your worst label rather than your greatest potential. But protection has its price. At the age of 13, I became rebellious. I broke every rule in the school. I got associated with the wrong kind of kids, got into wrong habits. I went from that kid who was so well-mannered, so well-spoken and articulate, to the kid who should be avoided at all costs. So this was 1991. I had an encounter with Jesus. I rededicated myself to the Lord. I repented, and I found myself in a Bible school within a few months. Here's the problem: no spiritual mentorship. No one taught me the spiritual discipline that was required of me. At the Bible school, I stuck out like a sore thumb because all my friends were from rural areas of India, and I was the only one from the urban sectors of India. And to me, the Bible was just a textbook and something that I had to study through. So there was zero, there was zero growth on the spiritual front in my life. At 15, I was into Led Zeppelin, and I was into hard rock music, which was considered satanic at that time. I loved Led Zeppelin, I loved Black Sabbath, I loved Skid Row, I loved every hair band of that time. I didn't have one Indian song in my cassette collection at that time. I graduated from Bible school in 1996, but I was not prepared for the shock that awaited outside of the Bible school, because Bible school can be heaven on earth if you do it right. I picked up the guitar at the Bible school, and I had a senior who taught me how to play the guitar. His name is Tuanza Tuang, and he is from Myanmar, and he taught me how to play the guitar, and that love for music ignited something in me, and I became good at it. So when I graduated from the Bible school, I had no path forward. I did not know what to do because I was too radical for being for a pastor, and I was too young for anything. So I was not ready for the life ahead. And so what happened was that I went straight into rock bands. I saw some things that I didn't like within the church and within the Christian leadership, and I didn't like the culture, and I said, okay, this is not the kind of Christianity I want. So I just left the ministry altogether and went straight into rock bands and started playing with a world music band in the beginning. So I went from being a Christian with a theological degree to a rock musician with a theological degree. And the excuse I offered at that time was that I wanted to have a Christian band like Petra. And so I just wanted to have the experience of playing on stages, and that was the kind of excuse I was giving out to those who asked me how I could leave the Christian faith and go on into this rock and roll life. Type rebel if you have a similar story like mine, and if you've had a rebellious streak in your life. In 1998, I started out as a bassist with a world music jazz band, and then I went off into playing with several bands both as a guitar player and as a bass player. Somewhere during that time, the typical rock and roll life began. A good musician. I was known, by 1998, I was known as a very aggressive bass player, and music became my purpose, my destiny, and I sought to fill the emptiness in my soul with the applause of the audience and the recognition my musicianship afforded me. Time passed. I got busier playing. I was literally playing every other day. I would finish playing, head straight to the bar, get drunk, and the rock and roll, the vicious loop of the rock and roll life which I was caught in. And my father and mother saw where this was going, and somewhere my father really knew that if he and my mother did not pray for me at that time, or if they did not intervene at the right time, I would be lost forever. The Lord would set me up for a date with him when I would have an unforgettable encounter with him. My father and mother knew that there was no way I would change my ways if they were to try and talk to me. Instead, what they did decide to do was to go to the Lord on their knees. They would walk 6 miles one way to my grandfather's church, where they would sit down, kneel down, and pray with great fervor that my life would change, that I would change for the better. And every day, as my father would he would work the early morning shift or the afternoon shift, and so every time they had to go to the church, my mother would come and stand in front of me for just that 1 second, hoping that the Lord would have spoken to her son, and I would always look at her and I would mock at her and say, this is not going to happen, Mom. Please go, pray harder. And that was the challenge I gave to my mother. So my mother would walk away with a heavy heart. They would come back and life would carry on. Meanwhile, there was this emptiness in my heart, and it was filling up with darkness, and I was losing hope. I had reached a point in my music career where the applause of the audience literally became a jarring noise in my ears. I hated it, and I did not know what was happening with my life, because I discovered that life had become meaningless in my eyes, and I really was grasping at straws. I was a sinking man in the sea of meaninglessness. I decided, okay, this is the last week I'm going to live through, and I'm going to just end the story once and for all. And I decided that Saturday would be the day when I would finish this life once and for all. So I think it was a Wednesday. I was lying on the bed in the living room, and my mother walks up to me, and for the first time she says, "Kiran, please come." And I looked at her and I said, "I'm not coming. I'm not coming. There's no way I'm coming. You should have prayed harder." But something inside me flipped. For a second longer, my mother stood there and her eyes were filling up, and I looked at her and I said, "Okay, I will come." So the idea was I would go there, spend 45 minutes just participating in the prayer meeting and just being there for their satisfaction, because I was going to end my life anyway, right? So I went there with them and we knelt down to pray. There was another pastor who was praying, and as they were praying, something happened. Something supernatural happened. The prayer began, and I was fidgeting. I was just looking around here and there. I didn't even close my eyes for the prayer. And then slowly something happened. I closed my eyes. I was sitting on the ground, and I moved from the posture of sitting to the posture of kneeling down. I lay my head on the floor, and when my turn to pray came, I said, I will not pray. And the pastor said, try, brother, please try. Please say just one word. We are not forcing you. And so I closed my eyes, and what happened that day was, did not say a word. I just started bawling like a kid. I was out of breath. I had snot running down my nose, and I was a mess. Something just changed. I fell into the most loving embrace I had ever known in my entire life. In 1998, apart from being a musician, I had also joined the university. And I was hoping to find meaning in life through the intellectual means. I was going to find the meaning of life through philosophy. Guess what? The inaugural lecture at the university in the master's degree was philosophy is dead. And so consider for a moment the disappointment that I had endured, right? And now, having lost all sense of meaning, I come into this weird presence, and I feel this immense weight of this unbelievably inexhaustible love. And all the hardness, all the anger, all the bitterness, and all the negativity of my life just wilted away. It's just melted away, and I fell into the most loving embrace that I'd ever known. I met Jesus, and that was the moment that transformed my entire life. I knew that I had run from light for such a long time, having known him from the age of 10. Instead of surrendering to him, I had run away from him. I had done everything to displease him. I had done everything to just break his heart. And finally, Jesus caught me. I didn't come to Jesus. Let me tell you this. I didn't come to Jesus. Jesus caught me in the nick of time, in that moment just before. If I had missed that encounter that day, I would have been history, bro. That's how close of a shave it was. And something in me flipped. I knew I had found the meaning of life. I knew I had found the greatest purpose of life. And so I came back home, made a few hundred calls to my friends. I said, I'm done with music, I'm out. And in the next few months, I went to the Bible school. I fell in love with apologetics again. And I had the great privilege of being mentored by Dr. G. Peter, my teacher, an amazing man who mentored me with knowing that I had potential. And so I graduated from the Bible school and I came back. So I started preaching. So I knew my parents were praying for me, but I deliberately made that choice to rebel against them even more. That was the worst part. And even though I did all I could to just slip away from them and walk away from Jesus, Jesus never let me out of his sight. That's my testimony, that This God is so caring, so loving that He won't let you out of His sight, and He loves you so much that He will meet you in the exact situation you are in, and He will embrace you, not because of all the best qualities you have, or not because of all the merits that you have, or by virtue of your birth and your social standing and things like that, but because he is a God who loves to get down and dirty, and He will come to you in the slush pit of sin that you are stuck in, and He will come and embrace you despite all the stink of sin. The reality of constantly struggling for money hit me again, so I moved from ministry into business in 2000, into a job in 2007, and 2009 I moved into business. I was partnering with my friends, then I had my own firm. I fell into the loop of disobedience and disappointments. I went from business to business. I lost 3 startups. I went into losses. I went into movie industry. Eventually, the Lord decided it was time for me to, meet Him again. And this time I was in the shower. And when I was in the shower, the cold water falling on me, and I was very vulnerable. Suddenly the book of Haggai just downloads into my head. I began to request the Lord, saying, Lord, let me just finish my shower, please. I know who you are. And yet the download into my head was so forceful that I decided, no, I need to get out of this. So I finished my shower in a hurry, still wet, opened my Bible, turned to the book of Haggai. As I read through the verses, I see that my life literally resembled every single verse in that book, and I knew that the Lord was giving me a final warning. So what do? I tell the Lord, okay, Father, I have a lot of debts. I have to clear a lot of loans. So if you would be kind enough, let me finish these 4 movies. The producers are expected at 11. So let me finish these 4 movies. And once I'm done, I will quit this industry once and for all. This is my promise. And the Lord says, yeah, so you're just going to finish your debts and you will come back here, huh? And guess what? The producers never came at 11 o'clock. So I knew that there was no escape. And so I turned to business again with my parents. I opened a small food business in 2019. In 2021, I lost both mom and dad in the second wave of COVID. It was a very painful experience. It requires another video, another story. Their prayers didn't just become the bridge between me and God. Their prayers literally became the bridge, the pathway between rebelliousness and redemption in my life. There's a parallel story running through this, and a secret that would shatter this glass cage, this beautiful glass palace that I lived in, right? And so as I became more active in the ministry, it started in 2007, because at that time the right-wing politics was still in its infancy. It was not that bad as it is today, but I would have these questions addressed to me. Were your grandparents, are you not a convert? Like, what is the reason you got converted? Did they pay you money? Questions like that. And at first, it didn't really matter to me because I didn't take all this seriously. But then it started, the snide remarks. Oh, rise back Christian, and things like that. And here's what I didn't realize. As a kid, there was a silent form of segregation. It's very sophisticated and silent in India, okay? So as a kid, most of my peers, my neighbors knew that we were Christians. So if if we ever had to go to a neighbor's home to pick up a glass of water, right, or a tumbler of water, we would go there, and I would ask for a glass of water, and they would give me the glass, and then they would ask me to lift the glass up and drink. I didn't know the dynamics of this. I didn't know the meaning of this action. In India, if you are known as a Christian, then it means that your forefathers came from the lowest of the lowest, and that's the simple truth. I didn't know this. I had no idea what this meant, what being untouchable meant, because I was too far removed from those realities in my life. My parents made sure that we never had those conversations in my childhood. We had a different vision of ourselves. Not only that, we came from an economically affluent background. My grandfather, my dad's father, was a British Army captain. He was a polyglot, and he was trained by the British Army. He was a doctor. He was a Second World War hero, fought in the Burmese theater, and my grandmother was a school teacher. And so recently, recently, a couple of years ago, my grandmother was a school teacher, and a couple of years ago, I went to visit my brother who lives in that place, in my ancestral place, and he took me to meet a very old lady, and she said, "Oh, I was, your grandmother's student," and she told me that my grandmother would always wear silk saris. Meaning, we came from a very affluent family, which we didn't need rice bags and economic support and things like that. But in sharp contrast, my mother's father was a cattle herd, right? But his brother was a Bible school graduate. My grandfather literally learned to read and write by scribbling on the rocks in the mountains of Nellore in his village, because his elder brother did not want him to study, right? Because he wanted my grandfather to remain a cattle herd. But he escaped from his village, and he arrives in Bangalore and meets up with these missionaries who introduce him to the gospel, and he becomes a servant of the Lord. My mother and he wrote their 10th standard exams together in the same year. Yet we were not poor. We lived a very affluent life. And for me to hear this thought that I was being introduced to, that my grandparents were somehow traitors of the culture and the religion, that was something that I was not prepared for, because I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what being an untouchable meant. I didn't know what rice bag meant. I did not know what a scheduled caste literally meant. I didn't know all of these things because my life was different. I was not brought up with these things in the back of my head. One day, a mutual friend, a friend of my friend, he literally calls me SC to my face, and I am taken by surprise. My mother simply, without blinking, looks at me and says, "Son, we come from the untouchable community." And that moment, everything just shattered. The glass house that I was living in just came crashing down, and everything that I had known about myself just fell apart. My father did everything in his life to ensure that the long shadow of caste would not fall upon us, to the point that he actually changed our surnames. We grew up without government help. We had no funding. We fought our way, my brother and I, we fought our way through life fair and square. We were not given any favor by anybody at any place in our lives. So if you have had these experiences, right, type protected in the comment section. Tell me how you lived your life in this kind of protection, and how it affected you when this glass house that you were living in just came down crashing, right? Sometimes the greatest act of love is not to tell the truth that you know that person cannot handle. When I learned who I was, it made me angry, it made me bitter. I felt God had slighted me, right? And He left me deeply disadvantaged. Finally, all the snide remarks, rise back convert, how much money did you get? How much money do you get? You must be receiving money in the form of dollars, all that began to make sense. The greatest advantage one can be born with is neither economics or caste. The greatest advantage a human being can be given is this sense of dignity. You are an equal to the other human beings. And in the Indian caste system, I was born without it. I now had a new demon to deal with now. The fact that I came from this absolutely rejected lot of a human being, and I had to rediscover the love of Christ all over again. It was, as time passed, I began to realize that it is precisely because I am the reject of the world that the gospel of Christ makes the most sense. As a philosopher and as a Christian apologist, here's how I would make my case for Christ. So before I make my case for Christ, I would like to contrast it with the religion of my forefathers, as many of my friends would suggest. And I would like to show how Christ redeems me even at the most fundamental levels. So the first question is of identity. Who are you? Who am I, right? And here in this the answer to this question is that I am born cursed, out of favor with God, unworthy of studying His scriptures to enable me to pursue Him or her and find Him so that I can have a relationship with God. Number one. So I'm born out of favor, at a disadvantage, cursed and thrown away and rejected by God at my birth, a birth that God Himself designed for me. Because God is God and He creates everything. So my birth is no accident. If my birth is no accident, then I am born out of favor with God, not because of an accident, but because God did not want me. Okay, that's my first problem. Second problem, here's the second problem. My forefathers were destined to carry to do the menial and the most hopeless jobs in the society. So by virtue of the birth, the family of birth, the caste that I was born into, I did not have the privilege or the fair opening for me to really excel at something and become or make something of myself. That is because my destiny was written in the stars. Okay? That's cosmic injustice, brothers and sisters. Okay? That's second. Third, I can never actualize. As an untouchable, I could never actualize. I could never actualize and I could never reach my fullest potential because I am stuck in a karmic wheel of cause and effect for which I am not responsible. If I am born an untouchable, forbidden from pursuing God, then the cause of that injustice is not me. It is God Himself. So finally, endless cycles of being reborn into a karmic cycle, right? Where the odds are stacked against me in an eternal wheel of cause and effect. a state of moral perfection that God is demanding of a finite being like me. A state of moral perfection that I could never achieve, not in one eternity, but in 10. I could never reach God. So I was doomed from out the gate. I was doomed from out the gate. But in sharp contrast, listen to the answers from the Bible. But here's how Jesus answers these questions. Who am I? The question of origin. The opening book of Genesis, the first book of Genesis, where the story of the creation of mankind is recorded. The Bible says, and God made man in his own image. In his own image, he made them male and female. Bro, I'm telling you, that means that I am a human being that carries the very breath and the signature of God. And therefore, I am equal and worthy of love and dignity and respect. Here's how Jesus would answer the question of origin. I come from the most holy one of Israel, the God who is so holy that his holiness has to be remembered every second by the angels, and such a holy God has written his moral law into me. So my origin is not of chance. My morals don't come from arbitrary renditions of human imagination, but from the holiness of God. Therefore, I carry the potential to be holy, just as my God was, because out of his shadow cometh me. I come from his shadow. I bear his image. What am I doing here? What is my purpose? You see, purpose has so many other dimensions to it. For example, value. What is my worth? What is my value? And here's how it is answered in the Bible. The Son of God, the one true living God, walked the face of the earth, took all of human sin upon himself, and died on the cross as a demonstration of how valuable a human being is in the sight of God, because you and I carry that signature, that breath of God in us. Now comes the fourth question. Where am I going from here? What is the end of the story? And the answer to that question is that when it's all over, I will go into the presence of the Most High. Jesus broke that bread before dying on the cross, and he made a promise in Matthew chapter 26. He said, I will not eat of this bread nor drink of this wine until the day when I shall have it with you. So, bro, my destiny is that I will sit at the table of God as his son, washed by the blood of Christ, reconciled to him, and made a partaker of his glory by sitting at his table and sharing and breaking bread with him. That's my destiny, in sharp contrast to whatever anyone else had to offer. And this is why I choose Christ. The untouchable went from being the untouchable to unshakable, the reject to royalty, because I didn't choose Christ. Let me bust that myth right here. I didn't choose Christ, he chose me. He loved me and he chose me, and that's why I choose Christ. That's not transformation, bro. That's liberation. That's not theology. That's transformation. And that's not just transformation, it's liberation. That's the difference between a system of thought that imprisons humanity and a love that liberates the human soul. And Jesus is the love that liberates that human soul from the prison of human ideology. I'm very sure that you know how awkward this has been for me to record this testimony. But here's the thing. Maybe you somewhere, I don't know, wherever you are, you're suffering with these 4 questions. Maybe you're suffering with the question of value. Maybe you're suffering with the idea that nobody cares, that you're not worthy of anything, that you don't have anything, any innate worth in you. And let me tell you something. If you come to the cross is the confluence of human unworthiness, but God's grace that lifts him from being unworthy to the state of being the true Son of God, who has been bought by the blood of Jesus Christ. If you come to Jesus, you are called to sit at the table of God the Father, to break bread and fellowship with him. That is the essence of Christianity. Jesus doesn't see your caste, your class, your mistakes of the past, and your heritage of whatever kind, whether you're royalty or the reject. Jesus sees you for who you truly are. Jesus loves you the way you are. The same Untouchable who was transformed by the same Jesus who transformed this untouchable to be bold enough to share this testimony with you is calling you also. If you're struggling with life, with the problem of sin, with your question of destiny, if you're facing these four questions, and the cacophony of life cannot silence these questions that seem to just run on repeat in your head, I invite you to come to Christ. I invite you to call upon him, and I invite you to just ask him into your heart and surrender to him, and watch him transform you into a son of God or a daughter of God.